Hi, Katie and Anna. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. Hopefully, you're having a great day so far. It is Wednesday, September the 2nd, and this is Let's Talk Tropics, by the way. I'm going to make a little adjustment here with this headphone here, real quick, and just see if I can get this to work a little bit better. So, as we go through this show, we've got a couple of different systems that we're going to be watching here. Hopefully, you can hear me okay right now. We've got, even though we're here at the peak of the hurricane season, we're really not seeing a whole lot of action out there, but we do have one strong tropical wave that's probably going to become our next storm here in just maybe the next couple of days. Next name on the list is Gabrielle. We're just a little bit behind schedule when it comes to the numbers on hurricane season. I'm going to show you the chart here coming up in just a little bit. But first of all, let's get going. We've got partly cloudy skies here in Lafayette. Temperature right now 88 degrees. It feels more like 93. The dew point is 70, and I know that a lot of folks are expecting some big-time fall-like weather, but we have to ease our way into it. And when we get some dew points that drop into the upper 60s to near 70, especially here end of August, early September, that's that little bit that we can just take. It's very hard-pressed to get a really good cold front to come through. I know about maybe 15, 20, maybe a little more than 20 years ago, I guess, we had a good one come through in August. But since then, it's really hard-pressed to get cool air in here, so we'll take the dry whenever it'll come in. There's a quick look at the big picture when it comes to the radar. We do have a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity out in the offshore waters, and then a disturbance in the upper levels is moving north of us, so that's going to probably keep the chances for rain going there. Meanwhile, you can see out here in the Gulf waters, we've got those showers there, but for the most part, everything is kind of pushing off toward the southeast. Earlier this morning, we had some action over southeastern Texas. Looks like there's a little bit of a delay in the radar there. So let's go ahead and grab a different one here and see what we got. There's the Fort Polk radar. That one looks like it's been updated. So you can see those showers in the offshore waters, but you got a little bit of stuff there associated with that upper trough over the I-20 corridor. We'll take the Hammond radar. Nothing really going on in southeastern Louisiana except for right there along the coast. So that's a quick look at what we've got on our radar. By the way, this one is live again today, and I know I've been in Baton Rouge the last few days, but the rest of the week, Let's Talk Tropics is going to be right here live. Like, again, there's no place like home. Check it out. There's a look at our traffic cams. Really not a bad day here. We have a mix of sun and clouds across the region here. Got a giant wasp that wants to attack the camera again there at the I-10 and I-49. Big picture showing our frontal boundary that is still out in the middle part of the Atlantic, or rather, middle part of the Gulf waters, rather. And that is going to be showing a sign of some of those thunderstorms there. Sorry, I'm kind of delaying here. It looks like some of you know how sometimes you work with a program for a long time and then you do an update? and now everything's in a different place on my menu for some reason. I wish I would have looked into this stuff before I started the show. Well, anyway, we'll just move along. There's not going to be any telestrating on this one until I can find out where it is. So let's take a real quick look at what's going on along the beaches here along the northern Gulf Coast. Gorgeous day in Panama City Beach. Looks pretty there in Orange Beach as well. Areas to the east are getting more of that offshore flow and more of that drier air, and hence there's a little bit more sunshine. You get over toward Cocodrie, it starts to get a little bit cloudy, and we've got a mix of sun and clouds out over Galveston, where we had some bigger thunderstorms roll through during the early morning hours. So there's a look at our wave heights. If you got some plans on doing boating, I think you're going to be okay. Winds will be out of the east about 5 to 10 knots, and seas about 1 to 2 feet. All right, let's see what we've got here. There is the thunderstorm activity across the northern part of the Gulf of Mexico. And at this time, we're not seeing anything developing there, which is good news, and we're probably going to be seeing that front just kind of dissipating, but there will be scattered showers and thunderstorms continuing over that region for the next several days. If we do get any kind of a low to develop, it's probably going to be over the eastern Gulf, and most likely that would shift over into the Atlantic over the course of time. Central America, we've got a tropical wave that's working its way way inland over Nicaragua and Honduras. It's bringing some showers and thunderstorms on the east side of that wave. A little more convection there north of Panama, but that's going to continue to move toward the west and doesn't have a chance for development. We've got another tropical wave. If you look there to the southeast over around Trinidad, we've got a tropical wave there, but it's kind of been dealing with a lot of Saharan dust and some dry air too, so not likely that we're going to be seeing any development there. But farther out in the far eastern Atlantic, that is where our next tropical wave is, and it has a much better chance for development. At least at the last check, it was about 70% that we're going to see something develop in the next couple of days, and it should drift off toward the west. And there are those other two tropical waves there in Central America and the far southeastern Caribbean. So the tropical weather outlook has been up for the past couple of days with this tropical wave as it rolled off the African coast. Now the wave is kind of down south of the Cape Verde Islands and will continue to drift off toward the west. Indications are that it will form into a tropical depression and most likely will have our next tropical storm. And if it gets a name, that one's going to be called Gabrielle. Now, the global tropics hazard outlook is going to be updated a little bit later today. So this is actually last week's graphic. I'll have the new one for you tomorrow, but it was already indicating some action over the Atlantic Ocean from September 3rd through September 9th, September 3rd being tomorrow. And that's right about where what could be Gabrielle is going to be. But it also was showing some increased action over the Atlantic Ocean continuing into the following week. Now, that still might be that same tropical wave or what might be Gabrielle. Also, a little bit of a highlight there over the southern Bay of Campeche in the western Caribbean. Not seeing a lot there right now, but we do have that tropical wave that's going to continue to work west, but at this point it doesn't look like we're going to see any development. So Euro tropical formation forecast, and this is also showing where systems could track between now and next Monday, so over the course of the week basically. That frontal boundary still situated off the southeastern United States. That's probably why you're seeing that little yellow shading there near the Bahamas and South Florida. Southern part of the Caribbean over along the Panamanian coast is also a little bit higher on that forecast, and this forecast was released yesterday, so this is fairly new. And then of course over the eastern part of the Atlantic, you're seeing high chances that there will be some tropical cyclone formation, or at least a track there over the far eastern Atlantic. And of course that is what our tropical wave is right now, and which probably will become Tropical Storm Gabrielle here down the road. So into the analysis a little bit, in the area where that tropical wave is, and I apologize that I'm not able to do any telestrating on the show for today, but there in the eastern part of the Atlantic, the water temperatures are plenty warm to support any tropical weather. There has been some Saharan dust, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but the far western Atlantic, the Caribbean, and the Gulf, that's where the steamy water really is, where some of these water temperatures are up maybe 87, 88, 89 degrees. And Sean, no, we don't have a hurricane in the east. Oh, in the eastern Pacific. Yes, we do have one in the eastern Pacific. I think it's called Kiko over there. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's Sean Wynn, a hurricane. He put in the comments there, a hurricane in the eastern Pacific. Yeah, I believe that one is called Kiko, and I think it's a pretty significant system. I do focus a little bit more on the Atlantic basin though, Sean, because that's kind of what threatens us here a little bit locally, but thanks for bringing that up. Tropical cyclone heat potential is still fairly extreme there over the western part of the Caribbean, and even though we haven't seen a lot of systems come anywhere near that area, that's kind of the fear over the next several weeks as we roll through the peak of the hurricane season and we get into October, especially when the Central American gyre starts to fire up again toward the second half of the hurricane season. If that heat content is still high like this, that's going to be a big concern, because developing tropical systems can tap into this heat content and sometimes go from a tropical depression or a weak tropical storm to a hurricane lickety-split. And that high heat content extends now across much of the southern Gulf and the Florida Straits there between Cuba and Florida, and even over parts of the Bahamas. But there's a secondary area there off the South American coast. It's kind of part of the track of where tropical waves and tropical systems go when they're coming from Africa. So if it can tap into that, sometimes you can get some intensification there. There are inhibiting factors, but I will say there's not too many of them. Even though we've got some Saharan dust that's interacting with with that wave over the central part of the Atlantic, getting over there toward Trinidad and the southern Windward Islands. The other tropical wave that we're watching that could become Gabrielle is far enough south of some of that dry air and Saharan dust. So that's why there's a more likely expectation that that's going to develop. But if you look over in the far western part of the Caribbean and even the Gulf, really little, if any, dry air, nor any Saharan dust there. The other inhibiting factor always is wind shear. And there's a decent amount of wind shear that's still lingering around this tropical wave over around the Cape Verde Islands. That's the reason why I think the National Hurricane Center is calling for a better chance for development with this storm over the next couple of days. So I don't think it's going to be becoming a tropical depression today, maybe late tomorrow, but more likely a little bit later this week as it can move into an area with a little bit less wind shear and also a much more moister atmosphere so that it would have a better chance. But on the general track, looking at the surface features especially, it does appear that this is going to kind of stay on a west and a west-northwesterly track. Moving along, I can go ahead and move these along for you. I wish, again, I'm going to try to figure out that telestrator. I might have to go ahead and roll that back into the program once again. But let's just kind of follow along that low there over the central part of the Atlantic. And there are going to be other lows, probably waves coming off of the African coast. But you see here as we're almost 10 days down the road before this is even going to be reaching the northern Leeward Islands. And this is this morning's Euro from early today. So you can see that it is going to take its sweet time moving across the Atlantic. So again, we've got a lot of time to watch this. That ridge of high pressure will start to slide off toward the southeast a little bit, and hopefully it'll start to make that turn, or at least a trough will kind of catch it coming off the lower 48. But again, I'm taking you out here 360 hours, so we're way out in La La Land. So if we focus just on this part, I think a good chance that this is going to develop into a weak system and maybe head very, very close to the northern Leeward Islands. Let's grab the GFS, and the GFS has been a little bit more robust with this, but again, kind of a slow mover across the Atlantic there. So now we're getting into Sunday. So we're here getting into this is almost a week away. And as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, you start to see a little more intensification. And again, this is just one computer model. They're all going to be running a little bit different, especially when you get out this far, because this map right here, which is indicating a hurricane somewhere north of the Caribbean, is about 10 days away. So as I said, this is going to be a real slow mover as it moves across the Atlantic. I mean, this is a week from today where it would get toward the northern Leeward Islands and then start to make its round around that ridge of high pressure. And hopefully we can get a nice trough to come off the East Coast. So both the Euro and the GFS right now are giving it that curve, which has been kind of the pattern of most of our tropical systems from the Atlantic over the course of the hurricane season this year, which has really been fantastic to keep things not just away from the Caribbean and the Gulf, but also it's been steering things away from the U.S. East Coast. So far, everybody's been in pretty good shape this hurricane season. Canadian model also showing a very slow-moving system, but not a very strong system, and maybe another one kind of following it along. Canadian model shows a little bit of deepening here as you get out to day 10, but as I said, I don't think you got a whole lot to worry about this week because it's going to take a long time for this to get across the ocean. But fortunately, even the Canadian model is keeping this away from the Caribbean as well as the Gulf waters. Let's finish off with the icon here real quick, and there's the wave moving west. Icon goes out 7 days, so we don't quite see as far out into the future, but even the icon is showing some slow movement, and even 7 days out, it's still pretty far away from the Leeward and Windward Islands. So again, a lot of time to watch this, but there is a pretty good chance that this is going to become our next tropical system in the Atlantic Basin. I'm looking back down in the chat here, Sean. The Eastern Pacific has been very busy this year, but not unusually busy. A lot of times, though, when you see less activity in the Atlantic, it does tend to show a little bit more activity in the Pacific. So, good point to bring out there. But yeah, they've had quite a bit, but their hurricane season, Sean, actually starts on May 15th. So they've got a couple of extra weeks before, and things really start to kind of ramp up pretty quick there in the Pacific. So a lot of tropical systems in the Pacific this year, but a lack of them so far. And I say so far here in the Atlantic because usually the month of September brings about 4 named storms. October usually about 2, and maybe November on average about 1. But if you remember 2024, we had a lot of tropical systems during the months of October and November. So there's still time to make it up to some of the forecasts, and there's also plenty of time to get our way up to what the average would be. If we just get the averages, we're still going to end up with an average hurricane season, which is 14 named storms. By the way, now that we're in the month of September, it is the busiest month of the hurricane season. Pretty much the entire Atlantic basin is open. The majority of our tropical storms and hurricanes originate in the eastern part of the Atlantic, and they do tend to curve around, kind of like what Hurricane Aaron did a couple of weeks ago. And also Fernand kind of made that turn a little bit too, pushing off toward the north before it dissipated. But there are sometimes there is a little bit more action sometimes in the Gulf and the Western Caribbean toward the latter part of September and going into the early part of October as the Central American gyre starts to wind up and you start to get these disturbances that'll rotate around that. If you're not familiar with the Central American gyre, I do have a link in the description below if you want to click on that later on at your leisure and go ahead and check that out so you may understand that just a little bit more. So, now we're in September, so we are just about at the mountaintop. September the 10th is generally known as the peak of the hurricane season. So once we get there, activity does drop off fairly quickly as we work our way into October. But even there, toward the beginning of November, the amount of activity on average is still about the same as what we would see on August the 1st. So you can't let your guard down just yet because tropical storms and hurricanes can form closer to home. I know when we look at these things that are out in the Atlantic Ocean, they're just days and days and days away. But sometimes you can get something to fire up there near the Yucatan Channel or in the Bay of Campeche, and that's a little bit too close to home, and it doesn't give you quite as much time to prepare. So that's why we go ahead and tell you to continue to stay ready for tropical weather all the way through the hurricane season. So again, we can't really quite give up on hurricane season, or let's say not call it a bust just yet, because we've already had 6 named systems, and the 7th one, the name system, probably going to come in the next couple of days. Today's September 2nd. We usually see our 7th named storm on or about September the 3rd. So we are still in the ballpark when it comes to average. Now, we've only had 1 hurricane, so we're behind schedule there. Usually we see the second one by August the 26th. Will Gabrielle or this future storm become a hurricane? That is unknown at this point. But Aaron was a major hurricane, so we're still a little bit ahead of schedule in that column because usually we don't have our first Category 3 or higher until about September the 1st on average. And I know that in past years we've had several Category 3 or higher hurricanes well before September the 1st, but we've had a number of very busy hurricane seasons over the last 10 to 15 years. So usually we see about 3 major hurricanes over the course of the hurricane season. So again, I know a lot of the forecasts were showing above normal, not quite as robust as what the forecasts were for 2024, but most of the forecasts were calling for at least an average or just above average. So the average is 14 named storms, and we're here only about halfway through the hurricane season. So we got a little ways to go, and on average, these numbers would probably verify to about 13 to 14 before the hurricane season is over if we just end up with a normal season. So again, don't let your guard down just yet. Let's just keep our fingers crossed. I'm glad that nothing's coming toward the Gulf Coast. I'm glad nothing has come toward the Gulf Coast, especially over these last few days. I don't know about you, but seeing all the different stories about Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Gustav and the number of hurricanes and tropical systems that affected us here in Louisiana at the end of August and the early September September, part of September. It's been a little rough to go back and look at some of that history, especially if you've lived here as long as I have. And I know there's a lot of you out there that probably saw some of those and brought back some rough memories, because that was not an easy time for many folks here along the Gulf Coast. So hopefully we'll continue to keep our luck and we won't have to deal with anything near us for the rest of the 2025 season. Can't write it off yet, but let's just keep our fingers crossed. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. By the way, if you do, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also turn on those notifications. You can hear my forecast every weekday on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. And if you didn't know, I'm also helping out my friends over at WBRZ Channel 2 over in Baton Rouge. I'm usually there on weekend mornings and also Monday and or Tuesday mornings. I know that we're on cable over a large part of the Acadiana region, but if it's not on your cable box, you can always visit WBRZ.com and you can stream our newscasts live. I would really appreciate the visit if you want to join me there on those weekend and early weekday mornings. Also, if you wouldn't mind, follow my social media pages, both on Facebook and X, and thanks to everyone who's already subscribed to Acadiana Weather Today right here on YouTube. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. I'll talk to you tomorrow morning on Acadiana Weather Today, and I'll see you again live here for Let's Talk Tropics at noon on Wednesday.